I've learned more about feminine energy from trans women than from cisgender women. And why do you suppose that is? My answer to that would be that trans women have to work extra hard to amplify their feminine energy strongly enough to not get misgendered. And for many transgender women, this is a skill of life or death importance to them. And so, at the surface, we might see this manifest by way of hyper-feminized presentation through makeup or clothing. And while makeup or clothing is not necessarily what makes a person feminine, these are the outward signifiers that people rely on, particularly those who don't know how to read energy. So when you are trying to communicate your gender to someone, this is often the first thing that people are going to look at. But the reality is that feminine energy is something that comes from within. It comes from the heart. And feminine energy is something that a lot of cisgender women, including myself, had lost touch with as a result of post-traumatic stress, because it requires feeling. And there was so much pain that the nervous system naturally shut down any inclination to feel our pain. So I feel that God is relying and trusting trans women, especially, to lead to help usher in this new era of feeling. Because they, especially, more than anyone, have collectively had to battle so much to get their feminine energy, to amplify it well enough to be recognized out of a masculine body. So, on the spiritual level, being trans is important and respectable, admirable, and something that we can all learn from, regardless of our gender identity. So, the problem is that there is a prevalent queerphobia that, as best I can tell, comes from Christian origins, where people have this idea that the Bible condemns it, and thus they are rallying behind this. But the Bible condemns a lot of things. It condemns leavened bread. It condemns alcohol. Drinking. in excess. It condemns judging other people. And yet, this one thing seems to be the thing that people focus on, this homophobia. So, a lot of that has to do, in my perception, with the desire of heterosexual men to be perceived as very masculine. And so they have to condemn things which they perceive as a threat to their desirability as a masculine partner. So some heterosexual men might experience homophobia and transphobia because they feel attracted to the feminine energy of trans women. And trans women have, in many cases, very strong feminine energy, strong enough to attract cis straight men who then feel the need to assert their transphobia and their homophobia so as to counteract this feeling of not understanding that the attraction to a trans woman is because there's feminine energy there, not because they're gay, but because they're attracted to feminine energy, and that's natural and that's normal. So it's something to keep in mind about what we see in the world in terms of how people rally against transgender identity. And there are other issues like trans people in sports. This is something I feel can be remedied by having a weight class like you have in boxing, because in reality there are also very masculine women. There are intersex people who argue that gender should be based on identity, are conveniently ignoring the reality that intersex people also exist. And if you want to restrict the existence of bathrooms to only male and female, then you are still forcing a group of people to not be able to conform to your standards. So the idea that it should be defined by anatomy is it's problematic on a lot of levels. So this is not to say that transgender and intersex are the same thing. They're very different, but where the bathroom issue is concerned, there are some similar issues there. So food for thought. There's what the Bible does encourage is loving one another, and especially Jesus in particular said to love one another, love your neighbor, love your enemy, and this supersedes any other ideas we may have gotten from the Old Testament regarding whether or not homosexuality is to be considered a sin.